Welcome back to College Football Addiction. I've got Chad Bishop back with us for the first time since before the season to talk a little bit about this Georgia Tech Notre Dame game. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution is where you can read
Was
him.
that this season? Was that
Dude,
this season?
yeah, it feels like 4 seasons ago from where
Yeah,
I'm sitting. So
yeah, crazy.
maybe a little more comfortable of a seat as we were talking about on your side. But how you doing, man? What's going on?
Doing well, man. Feels like fall up here in Atlanta. It's like been in the 60s. It's football weather. A little too chilly actually for me in the mornings, but it is football weather up here in A-Town.
It was 72 degrees this morning. My wife put my kids in tracksuits to go to school, and I was like, "This is stop!" Like, she's like, she. I stepped
Yeah,
outside to pull the trash cans up from the road, and I said, "It's not very cold out." And
yeah,
she goes, "Yeah, I probably went a little overboard with the."
yeah,
I was like, "Yeah, don't make the chili just yet. Give it a few
yeah.
more weeks."
I bet the folks coming to from South Bend this weekend will think it's a heat wave down in Atlanta. It's going to be like
Yeah.
72 on Saturday, and us Atlanta folks will have light jackets on. So
Um, Big picture with the team, 5-2 right now. Obviously, the massive win to start the year in week 0. Losses to Syracuse in Louisville, but then a little bit got headed right in the right direction with wins against Duke and Carolina. The game against Carolina was insane there at the end, and a ton of fun to see Jamal break off that big run. And in a week where there was a ton of fun games, I think that was an underrated one because it was on the CW, and I don't know how many people were tuned in, but when I saw it was close late, I was like, all right, this is either going to be a train wreck for somebody or really, really fun for somebody at the end. And so it was a great game. So 5-2, the mood, I mean, has to be pretty good. I know that, fans are insane and would rather be 6-1 or, I get it, but like
Mhm.
5-2 has to be pretty good.
Yeah, if you're a Georgia Tech fan and you take a step back and be realistic, and I know fans rarely are, right? Short for fanatic, but 5 wins out of the first 7 games. If you would have went into the season, I think most Tech fans would have taken that, thinking on paper a loss to Florida State and a loss to Louisville. Now they beat Florida State and kind of gave one away at Syracuse, lost by 3 points, had to have an epic comeback and almost completed that comeback. So they're a couple plays away from being 7-0. They're also a couple plays away from maybe being 3-4, or 4-3. If they miss that field goal against Florida State, if they don't do some things right against Duke or North Carolina, things could be the other way. And Brent Key had a good point. Like you look at the North Carolina game, you look at the Louisville game for Georgia Tech, very, very similar games in the way they played out. Georgia Tech had too many mistakes, a lot of special teams miscues. Louisville took advantage and won that game. North Carolina didn't, and Georgia Tech got out of there with a win. So yeah, 5-2 after 7 games. I think they're probably sniffing a top 25 ranking again if they can pull an upset over Notre Dame. But again, trending in the right direction. A lot of positive things, but a brutal stretch ahead starts Saturday against Notre Dame.
Yeah, and I mean it's a testament to Key and the team and the players and everybody around the organization because yeah, I think Texas is good. I think Oregon's good. I still think Ohio State's good. Georgia's good. But like outside of a few teams, it's really hard to know who's good, who's not good in college football. Like North Carolina getting blown out by JMU and then making it close with Georgia Tech. Like anybody could lose any week. It feels like the NFL. Anybody could lose any week. Anybody could win any week. And so to string 5 of them together, there aren't many teams with 5 or more wins in college football. And so,
Yeah, and something Brent Key talks about all the time is consistency. A lot of coaches talk about it, right? But like, especially nowadays with transfer portals and guys opting in and out, and coaches changing everywhere, like being consistent week in and week out. Look at Tech's last 2 games. I mean, beating Duke at home. Duke was undefeated. Going on the road and beating North Carolina, a team that had lost 3 in a row, had their backs against the wall. And North Carolina came back. And you mentioned it was 27-14 Tech in the second half, and then 34-24 in the fourth quarter, and North Carolina almost came back. So I think when you watch Georgia Tech football, you know what you're getting, right? Like you're going to get a good football team. You're going to get a good game. They're going to play pretty sound football. Whether they win or not, I don't know, but they seem to put a good product on the field each and every Saturday.
I'll ask another big picture and then we'll move on to the game. But what has maybe surprised you the most or happened that you weren't expecting with this team? Maybe outside of really big picture, like beating Florida State or something like that.
Yeah.
But like what surprised you the most? And maybe the other side, have you thought was lacking or you're most disappointed with in the team? So kind of both sides of it.
No doubt. First of all, Georgia Tech's defense has been really good. I mean, not like world beaters. They're not the best defense in college football, but they have been way improved, and especially stopping the run. Their run defense has been outstanding. And it's interesting because it's not a team that gets a lot of sacks or tackles for loss, but they clog that line of scrimmage. They got some good defensive linemen. Again, not guys that are like first round draft picks, right? But they run 6, 7, 8 guys out on defensive line. They clog that middle, and they're stuffing the run. They're doing an outstanding job against the run. Outside of the North Carolina game, again, you got Omarion Hampton, one of the best running backs in the country, so he got his. But by and large, they've been very, very good on defense, way better than I thought they would under first-year defensive coordinator Tyler Santucci. On the flip side, the offense has been okay, but it hasn't been maybe as explosive as it was at times in 2023, and the ground game really hasn't found its footing outside of the last couple of weeks. They credit the bye week with getting healthy and making some tweaks and making some adjustments to have better games against Duke and North Carolina, where the ground game was concerned. But that hasn't been as dominant. We all thought coming in this year with 4 or 5 returning offensive linemen back, Jamal Haynes, Haynes King, we thought those guys would be able to run the ball at will. But it really wasn't until last week against North Carolina, where they had 7.7 yards a carry, that they had shown that dominant run game. So I'll be curious to see how it goes moving forward, but it hasn't been there week in and week out for this team.
Playing this Notre Dame game at Mercedes-Benz this weekend as opposed to home. Only, I mean, it is in Atlanta, so maybe I'm nitpicking here, but what's the mood? Only 5 true home games, because you also had the Dublin game too, which was a Georgia Tech home game, and 2 of those being Georgia State and VMI. Like, are fans a little perturbed by that, or is it cool to go play in the Dome? Like, what are the thoughts around that?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably a little bit of both. For some context, Georgia Tech signed a contract with Mercedes-Benz Stadium to play what turned out to be 6 games there, starting in 2021. So they beat North Carolina there in 21, lost to Clemson there in 22, lost to Louisville in 23, play Notre Dame this year. Of course, the big news this week was they'll play arch rival Georgia there in 25, and the opponent in 2026 is to be determined. I think on the one hand, it's kind of cool. I'm sure the kids love playing there, right? Playing in that big stadium. I'm sure the opponent loves playing in there. But I think for the fan base, you're right. I mean, there's something to be said about playing on campus at your stadium, going through your traditions, having the opponent come into a hostile environment, as opposed to a Mercedes-Benz Stadium, which will have more of a neutral feel, despite it being, a home game. It's still a massive stadium where there's going to be a lot of opposing fans there, no matter who you play. So again, I think it's both sides of the coin. It's cool to play. You get a lot of attention. The game Saturday is on big ESPN, so there's that. But again, you don't really get to show off your school and your campus and have the team come into your atmosphere. So there's some drawbacks and there's positives for sure.
Yeah, and I understand Mercedes-Benz doesn't want them to play VMI there, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's going to be the bigger games, but those would be the games I feel like you want that home field advantage, right? Like you want Notre Dame to have to go. I mean, I think about Florida State playing there. It's been a house of horrors. Not that Mercedes-Benz has been much better. That just the city of Atlanta seems cursed for the Noles. But I think about yeah, if we play you guys in 2026, I would much rather play Mercedes-Benz than have to go on campus.
Yeah.
Because that seems like an advantage. I mean, Notre Dame could. I think it'll be close. Notre Dame could have more fans there, which is kind of crazy to me. They travel extremely well, especially when they're good. So, it's home, it's Atlanta, but it's still it's a little bit weird. So I kind of get the mixed emotions. Line opens up at 8.5, bet up to around 11 now.
Mhm.
I mean, maybe I'm still scarred from Dublin and all of the Guinness, but am I crazy in thinking that Georgia Tech's maybe not in the worst spot here? Notre Dame certainly looked better since losing to NIU, but they played Louisville close. Obviously, they beat them as opposed to Georgia Tech dropping a close game to them. But Stanford, Miami of Ohio, Purdue aren't really making me think that Notre Dame is back yet. What are your 30,000-foot thoughts on Notre Dame?
I think part of that is, Georgia Tech doesn't know its quarterback situation. Haynes King was hurt in the fourth quarter against North Carolina. He's day to day. We were at practice Tuesday. He was out there. But I still think it's questionable, right, whether he plays. So that's number one. If you take him off the roster, that's a huge hole for Georgia Tech. Number two is Notre Dame's defense is really, really good. So if Georgia Tech has a hurt quarterback and Notre Dame defense, or Notre Dame comes in with their big time defense, I think that's where you see that line jump up. I'm confused with Notre Dame too, right? Like, I keep going back to that Northern Illinois game. They lost at home, gave up almost 200 yards rushing to a Northern Illinois team that's not like, they're not a Boise State. They're not a group of 5 playoff contender. Inexplicable how you lose that game. On the flip side, they've been beating up people. I think I did the math. They're outscoring their last 4 opponents by like 33 points in this 4-game win streak they're on. So something has clicked. They're playing really, really, really good football. The question is, do they have another clunker like they did against Northern Illinois? Does Georgia Tech play out of their minds to have to beat them? I don't know. That's why we play this game, and that's why we love it. But I can see why everybody would sort of lean Notre Dame on this one for sure.
I think Brent Key's personality too is kind of like I said this to somebody else about Texas in Georgia. I think Texas is the better team. I like Kirby Smart in the underdog role. And I don't know
Sure.
if it's quite the same level with Brent Key. Like, I'm not putting him there. I know that's the
Yeah.
rivalry and stuff, but like, I think his personality is like, yeah, go ahead and doubt us. Like, go ahead
Yeah.
and like just the confidence, the swagger. Like, I think he's one of the guys, and any coach with any kind of competence should be able to play the underdog role up pretty well. Even when I was playing in school, like my coach,
Yeah.
we're gonna go out and David and Goliath these people at my small Christian high school. Like, but
Yeah.
like I think that Brent Key certainly, teams take on the personality of their coach. And I do think that that is something that he will play up and certainly something that he'll try to use to motivate them. And it seems like he'd be one of the more successful ones at doing it. Again, not putting him in Kirby's shoes just
Yeah.
yet, but similar.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's unfathomable to think Kirby Smart would lose 2 regular season games, right, at this point of his tenure at Georgia. But Brent Key loves the underdog role, and he makes no bones about it. He talks about it all the time, which is, it's funny because before that North Carolina game, they were 3-10 under Key after a win. They really struggled winning games after winning games, but after a loss, they're like 11-1, and before losing to Louisville, they were 5-0 against nationally ranked ACC teams. They love this underdog mentality. Brent Key says it all the time. He says, it's a Georgia Tech mantra. You tell a Georgia Tech person they can't do something, they're going to go out and invent something new or create some new technology or win a football game. So I don't think there's any doubt that but I would also say that he probably doesn't have to tell his team at this point that they're the underdogs and that they play like that. I mean, he's recruited kids and brought in kids and hammered that home of their mentality in the locker room that we're Georgia Tech. Not a lot of people believe in us. We're going to have to go get it done and prove the world wrong.
Yeah. I think Riley Leonard, even going back to his Duke days, was, he seemed so. I think Riley Leonard's a good quarterback, right? But I don't think he's elite by any means. And I think he looks really, really good at times against teams that he matches up well against, and not so good, against teams that maybe have a little more talent on defense. What do you think about that matchup of Leonard and their offense against Georgia Tech's defense, which has been better than maybe expected this year?
And so we go back to Georgia Tech's run defense and how good it's been, right? Does Georgia Tech sort of sell out here and dare Riley Leonard and Notre Dame to throw the ball? And then if they do, can Georgia Tech's secondary make some plays? Amari Harvey and Warren Burrell have been really good in Georgia Tech's secondary. Their safeties have been serviceable, but their pass defense isn't the strength of their defense. So sort of what is Notre Dame's game plan going in? Are they going to try to pound the ball just like Georgia Tech is going to do to them? Are they going to run the ball with Riley Leonard a ton? Does Georgia Tech know that going in and stop that run game? There's no secrets at this point in the season, so everybody knows what everybody's trying to do against one another. And so I think it's incumbent upon this Georgia Tech defense to sniff out the play, see what Riley Leonard is doing, and maybe that is a plan. Maybe it's make Riley Leonard beat you with his arm. And if he does, you tip your hat. But until then, maybe stuff the box and know they're going to call a lot of quarterback runs and see what happens after that.
Yeah, similar to obviously Florida State wasn't able to run the ball very effectively, but similar to their game plan against Florida State. Hey, if DJ can beat us throwing the ball, great. He couldn't, and they didn't let Florida State run at all, and found a way to stay in it late and found a way to win. So
the 2 games that Georgia Tech has lost this year, Syracuse with Kyle McCord and Louisville with their quarterback. I mean, those Kyle McCord had a field day, and credit to him. I mean, the kid made some excellent NFL type throws. And Louisville did the same thing, hit some big plays and picked apart Georgia Tech's secondary. So that's probably the game plan for an offense going against Georgia Tech defense. See if you can pick them apart with the passing game. So again, it comes down to Riley Leonard making some throws and that Notre Dame offense trying to find some holes in Tech secondary.
you talked a little bit about the schedule, and it does get a lot tougher starting this weekend. And then at Virginia Tech, who seems to be playing better. Maybe that Vandy loss isn't as bad as we thought early.
Yeah.
Miami, a really good team that Tech beat last year, but going to be a very tough one. NC State, I feel like that could be one that they could get. And then obviously UGA at the end is extremely tough. No favors done to Georgia Tech by putting, 2 bye games in or 2 bye weeks in 14 days, 15 days, which is a little bit weird too. I know that the third one in there has to happen, but even Florida State's is like, we had one early, one like now, and then one in a couple of weeks. So it was weird. But just this game, and really a lot of the big ones down the stretch feels like kind of a tipping point of, man, we could take this season from a good season to like a really great season if we could figure out a way to get this one, because then it kind of gives you maybe a little more room for error down the stretch against, I mean, shoot, there's 2 top 10 teams in there and then 2 other really good ones.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, for those who don't know, like you mentioned, it's Notre Dame this week, and then you got to go to Virginia Tech, which is always tough to play no matter what. Miami at home. You got NC State on a Thursday night, and at Georgia. Only 3 games in November, like you said, which is a very strange football schedule. But you start looking at bowl eligibility, right? And if Tech loses to Notre Dame, now they got to beat Virginia Tech, Miami, North Carolina State, or Georgia. If they lose at Virginia Tech, now you're down to one of 3 games you got to win. So it gets late early, as they say, and at 6-2 is going to look way better than 5-2 with another win over a top 15 team if they're able to pull off that Georgia Tech win. And I think you bring up a good point. Like Georgia Tech, like we mentioned at the start, they're a good team. Do they want to be great, right? Like, do they want to take it to the next level? Beating a number 10 Florida State, who was number 10 at the time, of course, and beating a number 12 Notre Dame, right? Maybe beating a top 10 Miami or knocking off Georgia finally. Like, all those things take Georgia Tech football to the next level. If they don't win those games and finish 6-6 again or 7-5, I don't know how much of a quote unquote success 2024 is. But if they can get a couple of these and win 8 regular season games, I mean, I think people will start to turn their heads and take notice that Georgia Tech has taken that next step.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times we use the word momentum instead of the word confidence, and that's probably a whole nother rant that I could go on. But yeah, if you beat Notre Dame, the pressure on you to like have to beat Miami or have to upset somebody else goes down, and may play a little more loose against Miami. Maybe, I'm not saying like, oh, you beat Notre Dame, you automatically just beat the Canes, who are very good.
Right.
But it doesn't feel like oh my God, we have to win this or things are falling apart. Like it's, man, we go out and play loose and see what we can do. And that confidence from beating a top 10 team probably, or top 15 team probably carries over a little bit there.
Yeah.
Do you have a prediction in this one yet? Do you have a lean on how you think this goes down?
Yeah, I do. Like I said earlier, I do lean Notre Dame. I just think with how they are playing right now, with the streak that they're on and their defense, the more I go over the numbers, their defense is just really, really good. And I don't know if Georgia Tech has faced a defense this good at this point who's playing this well. And then I just question the quarterback position for Georgia Tech. I mean, even if Haynes King does play, how healthy is he? Because it's the right side. It's either the shoulder or the arm or something over here that's giving him trouble. I mean, Zach Pyron, the backup, is a really capable quarterback. He's played a lot of football for Georgia Tech too, but I think that's going to be a factor for sure. So, that spread being 12, I'm not going to go that high, but I can see, Notre Dame winning this one, maybe a 34-24 or a 38-28 type of ball game.
You did pick Florida State the first time you were on here, so maybe Georgia Tech.
You're welcome, Georgia Tech.
Yeah,
fans.
maybe Georgia Tech. Maybe just pick Miami, pick
Always
Georgia.
pick against the Jackets.
Yeah,
that's there we go.
Keep going, and they'll be thrilled with you. So,
Yeah.
Chad, where can people follow you? Where can they find more of your work?
Yeah, ajc.com/Georgia Tech, of course, and at Mr. Chad Bishop on the Twitter X machine.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much for taking some time today and chatting with us.
You got it.